Welcome back to day 4 of Homeopathy Awareness Week, where we celebrate the birthday of the founder of homeopathy, Samuel Hahnemann. And we will be having daily episodes from the 10th to the 16th of April. If you haven't yet, do scroll back to the previous 3 episodes and you can have a little listen to that on there to Alex Tournier and some testimonials the day after that, more testimonials the day after that. And then today, a very special episode with Tammy from Texas. Now, let me explain. For the 5th year running, the Homeopathy Hangout podcast has been asking our listeners to send us in testimonials. And it can be quite tricky to actually get people to record a message and then send it in to us for various reasons. But this year was definitely the hardest. And we had to really post on social media, send out newsletters, and really scramble to try and get some testimonials from people around the world for our daily episodes. And then I logged into my SpeakPipe account to listen to the testimonials, and there is this lady called Tammy from Texas who sent testimonial after testimonial. Now, she is so well spoken. She really shares from the heart, and I had to reach out to her and had a chat. So we had a beautiful WhatsApp video conversation. It was lovely to see her walking in the streets of Texas. Tammy, you are a superstar. Considering how hard I had to work to get testimonials this year, I'm so grateful to all our listeners who sent that in. You are all superstars in my book. And Tammy, you are just a shining light, and for you to share your testimonials with all of us, enough so that we could actually create an entire episode with just Tammy's episodes. So you'll hear the various 5-minute snippets because SpeakPipe cuts it off after 5 minutes. So every now and again you'll hear, "Hi Eugenie, this is Tammy from Texas." And so Tammy from Texas, you will forever have a special place in my heart for creating a whole episode just by yourself for Homeopathy Awareness Week. Thank you so much. I really hope I get to give you a cuddle in person one day in the future. So thank you again for listening to our special daily episodes for Homeopathy Awareness Week. This is a daily celebration. We've got 2 more episodes, daily episodes to go after this. And I hope you're hanging in there with us on these episodes every day. And continue sharing homeopathy with your family and friends and everyone around you. Thanks.
Hi, Eugenie. This is my 3rd attempt. We'll see if I can do it in 5 minutes. I want to tell you about my daughter's concussion. She had a concussion in 7th grade. She was hit with a soccer ball in the head really hard and snapped her neck backwards and basically had like a whiplash type injury that involved a concussion. And I had done a lot of different things to try to help her. She had every concussion symptom in the book, everything from nausea, lack of appetite, headaches, dizziness. Couldn't read, couldn't focus on schoolwork. It was awful. And she was getting depressed because we had been working on this for months now, about 2 months, I would say. And I had taken her to a friend who's also a chiropractor and does body work and cranial sacral therapy. And she did everything she could. And then she referred me to someone who was a chiropractic neurologist that specialized in concussion. And he worked on her, did lots of different vestibular exercises, eye exercises, everything. But eventually her improvement just plateaued and she wasn't getting any better. And I would say she was about, maybe 50% from where she started, but still, it's very miserable. And I was working with a homeopath for my son. And while I had him on the phone, I said, "Hey, by chance, do you treat concussion?" And he said, "Sure." And he offered actually to treat her for free. He said, "I'll just give you 1 free acute," which I thought was really kind, especially after all the money we had already spent. So we got her started on the protocol he gave me, which was just 3 remedies, 1 each day. It was Arnica CM, Hypericum CM, and Nat Sulf CM. And then if I needed it, a 4th remedy, Apomorphinum 200C, for any lingering nausea. Well, we never needed the 4th remedy. She took the first one and the Arnica CM, there was no change. Second one, no change. Now, the 3rd remedy I was excited about because I had heard on a podcast a story about a little girl who had a concussion. Hers was pretty severe. And after she had healed, her mom still felt like there was more healing that needed to take place. And she said that Nat Sulf sometimes has that effect of turning back on areas of the brain that have basically shut down due to the injury. And when this little girl took the remedy, she immediately started looking around the room and said, like gasped and said, "Oh, Mama, look at the colors. They're so beautiful." And so she said that was the moment. That was the moment that they knew that her brain was like lighting up and turning back on. And so that stuck in my brain. And so whenever it came time to give her Nat Sol CM, I was disappointed because I had to send her to school that morning, right? And so I thought, well, if there's going to be, she didn't have an instant reaction, but I thought if there's going to be a delayed reaction, I'm probably going to miss it. Well, I like to say that God saved it for me. So we were on our way home from school, and she all of a sudden from the back seat says, "That's so cool." And I'm like, immediately my eyes shoot up to the rearview mirror, and I'm like, "What's so cool, Riley?" And she said, "Mama, everything out of my right eye is vintage, like sepia toned. And everything out of my left eye is cool colors like blues and greens." And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "What's it when you look with both eyes?" She goes, "Oh, it's normal." And I said, "Is that scary for you?" She said, "No, it's wonderful. I hope it never goes away." And I was just shocked. I thought, whoa, I just had chills and I thought, this is amazing. So I immediately took that as a sign that her brain was healing. And so we stopped at the store and I said, "How is it now?" She said, "Still there." And she's got this confidence and like joy about her that I hadn't seen in a really long time. And she's so proud of it, like this whole phenomenon that's going on. And so anyway, we get home, still there. She's just happy as can be. Well, the effects of that tapered off over about 3 days after having taken the Nat Sulf CM. So it was there, but it was less there. The colors weren't as vivid. The change wasn't as much. And as those symptoms tapered off, all of her concussion symptoms went away. So as her vision normalized back to what would be normal for you or me, all her concussion symptoms disappeared. And so they just gradually tapered as her vision returned to what we would consider normal. So it was an amazing experience. And I'm so thankful to all the homeopaths for all the hours of study, all of their diligence, all of their generosity. So many homeopaths give things away for free. And it's amazing to me. And I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful to you, Eugenie, for all you've done to help spread homeopathy and share your knowledge and the knowledge of your guests throughout the world. It's so empowering. It's so wonderful. And may God bless you. Hi, Eugenie. This is Tammy from Texas. I wanted to share another story. My daughter was probably 5 years old at the time and had been suffering with constipation for a couple of years. And it had gotten so bad that we did have to resort to giving her enemas. And thankfully, I had had experience with giving a child an enema before with my oldest child, and I had learned how to do it in a way that wasn't traumatizing. But of course, enemas are never fun. And she didn't enjoy the experience, although it did mean screen time for her, which was one of my tricks. But she really was having this problem. It was pretty much a chronic issue. I mean, it was all the time and it was so stressful. And I can remember spending a whole morning sitting with her on the toilet and crying. She's crying. I'm holding her hand. It's just traumatic, And so I had, I don't even know how I knew to give Illumina 30C. I'm thinking I just researched it and I decided to try it. And I did. It took 2 doses of Illumina 30C and she's never been constipated since. So they gave the first dose, she was improved. And then about a week later, it seemed like she needed a second dose. I gave her it again, and she's never needed it again. That was the end of her constipation. That was it. So really amazing. Sometimes it's too easy. It's too simple, and homeopathy doesn't get the credit it deserves because people discount it and they say, "Oh, she outgrew it," or something. No, it was the remedy. I know it was, and it was amazing and life-changing for us. when it happened. And I sure wish I had known about homeopathy sooner to help my older child. It sure would have helped so much. But anyway, so grateful to homeopathy. And I have more stories to tell, so maybe I'll do a couple of these. Okay, this is Tammy again. I wanted to share a story about my son. When he was a teenager, he got into the stage of just being really angry. Very little things would set him off. There was really no reason for the anger. It just kind of began to happen, and we weren't sure what to do about it, how to help him. In addition, he had a really hard time focusing on schoolwork. It was like he couldn't sit still for more than, a minute or two, and he was up walking around the house and getting distracted. And so I reached out to a homeopath and asked for his help. The very first protocol he gave for my son just melted away the anger. He just was not the same person anymore. It was, in a good way. He was not angry. He was back to his normal self. And it hurts my heart because I know so many parents struggle with this, and I know so many children struggle with this, and I wish they could get help, right? Because think of all of the strife that we avoided by homeopathy coming to the rescue and just re-establishing balance in our son and bringing peace back to our home. And, that is life-changing. That's what I think people don't understand is when you can nip these things in the bud before they really get going, you've just changed someone's life. So again, I just want to say thank you to all the homeopaths who have taken a part in helping families to regain peace, regain balance, and set an environment so that families can thrive instead of survive. So thank you so much. Hi, Eugenie. This is Tammy from Texas. I wanted to tell you the story of my daughter and her UTI that would eventually develop into a kidney infection because she didn't have any symptoms. So at 5 years old, we think she had a backflow of urine where the urine would kind of back up and go the wrong way and create a UTI. And she had a couple of UTIs, and the only symptom was more frequent urination, but there was no burning, no discomfort. And so one of her UTIs eventually developed into a kidney infection. And I wasn't able to get in to see my regular doctor. She had a fever going on, and I didn't have any other tools in my toolbox. So I knew that antibiotics weren't a good thing, that you should avoid them if you could, but I didn't know about homeopathy yet. And so this is how I got introduced to it, actually. So I took her to this other doctor who I had no relationship with. And this doctor had been visited by a drug rep the day before and prescribed her the antibiotic Bactrim. Now, Bactrim is not a typical antibiotic for UTIs. So I was concerned. And I called my sister to check because I knew that normally they give amoxicillin or something like that. And my sister said, yeah, she's a doctor. She said, yeah, that's true. That's not a normal antibiotic for UTIs. And she said, it may not work. Well, it didn't work. A couple days passed and Riley wasn't any better. And she said, I had no choice. I had to take her back in. And I figured they would change the antibiotic, give her something different. Well, because I had questioned it originally, the doctor's pride was in the way, and she doubled down and said, we're going to give her another dose. So when I questioned her and said, well, I don't think it's going to help because it's not, that's not a normal UTI antibiotic. She said, are you questioning my medical advice? Which in the US is code words for, I'm going to report you if you don't do what I say. And so I, through gritted teeth, smiled and said, no, of course not. And they held her down and they gave her this shot in the leg. And it did nothing. It did not help whatsoever. And all her symptoms, as far as fever, remained. She had pain at this point because of her back hurting, right? Because the kidneys. But anyway, we took her on to the hospital the following day. And they did a ultrasound of her kidneys and they gave her morphine. Now, her pain was not outrageous. There was no reason to give this poor child morphine. It was way overkill for what she had going on. And they sent her home. that was it. And they said, there's basically like nothing more we can do. And so I thought, well, I'm certainly not going to call that doctor back. So I was talking to my friend on the phone, and she said, answer a few questions for me. She said, are her pupils dilated? And I was like, oh, that's a weird question. I was like, yeah. I was like, they're huge, actually. And she's like, feel her feet. Are they cold? And I'm like, she's got 104 fever. I think it was 104, 105. I don't recall. But we were about to have to take her to urgent care. And I said, she's got fever. Like, she said, just feel her feet and let me know if they're cold. And I said, they are. And she said, don't do anything. I'll be right there. And she brought me Belladonna 200C. We gave her one dose, and in 10 minutes, her fever went from 104, 105 down to 100. And I was just shocked. And I looked at her and I said, tell me what you know. I mean, first of all, these were odd questions to be asking me. And then she comes and she gets the situation under control. And she explains to me that homeopathy doesn't just mask the symptoms, it cures, right? It stimulates the body to heal. And that was the beginning of my journey. I asked for the information to contact her homeopath, and that homeopath healed her permanently, right? So we were treating the acute with the Belladonna 200C, but it ended up being a bryonia. And I don't recall, probably 200C after a few times, and she was healed. Hi, Eugenie. This is Tammy from Texas. I wanted to tell you the story of my daughter who had gotten food poisoning. My husband and I had gone out for a date one night, and our children were home, and our older ones were taking care of the little ones. And for dinner, they were going to make sandwiches. And my youngest, the older ones, had said, you're old enough, go ahead and make your own sandwich. Well, she grabbed from some deli meat that was old, and she didn't know to look at the date, and it's just one of those things that slipped by us. And she ate old deli meat. And I immediately was concerned when I got home, and I put two and two together. I don't recall what made me go and check the date. Probably just that mommy, you have things in the back of your head. It's been a while since I've bought lunch meat. Wait a minute, y'all had sandwiches? And so I went ahead and gave her activated charcoal capsules and tried to do what I knew to do to mitigate the damage that was done. And I probably gave her Nux Vomica or something like that. And it was the following day, and we were actually at someone's quinceanera, and all of a sudden I could tell she was going downhill, like tanking hard and fast. Her stomach was hurting and cramping. Her vital force, I don't know if there's any other term to use, was just cratering. And I could see it happening. She was melting before our eyes. And I thought, this is going to be bad. This is not something small. She's going to be really sick. And the cramps were getting more and more intense. And I had contacted just a homeopath through Facebook, and she was very kind to assist me until my normal homeopath could take over. And so she gave me some remedies to help, but it still did not clear the case. I mean, she was not feeling well. And so it was the following day, my regular homeopath got a hold of it. And I think the biggest thing was her just completely lethargic. And I was so concerned. He gave her a protocol, and we followed it. And she never threw up. She never had diarrhea. She just got better. She just continued to improve. Her energy came back. And I was able to send him a video of her saying, thank you. And she's drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. And I literally felt like that was a situation where we could have easily landed in the hospital, and it just melted away. It just, the problem dissolved as easily as the remedies in the mouth. So anyway, we were so thankful for his help and guidance, and the other homeopath who generously took her time to assist me just via Facebook and Messenger, and just so grateful for homeopathy and all the ways it's touched our lives. Hi, Eugenie. This is Tammy from Texas. I wanted to share the story of my dad and his cancer. My dad had a metastasized melanoma, and he went through a great amount of suffering due to a drug that was given to him that should have never been given to him. It was given to him off-label for a symptom he didn't even have. And it was a very serious schizophrenic type of drug, an antipsychotic drug. And anyway, he unfortunately is no longer with us. But I would be remiss if I did not mention the help we received from homeopathy and through the guidance of a very experienced homeopath. My dad had so many symptoms. He chose to go the mainstream medical route, and we were hopeful because there is a new treatment for melanoma called targeted therapy, and then there's immunotherapy. And my dad was a candidate for both, and it gave us great hope. But unfortunately, when you dip your toe sometimes into the medical pond, and I'm not against all medicine, I think there's a time and a place, but I do think there's so many things that can be done to heal cancer. And I don't think there's more than one way to heal, is what I like to always say. But my dad was open to using homeopathy as a secondary line of treatment, mostly to alleviate his symptoms. And so we used it repeatedly all throughout the 7 months that my dad struggled. And he needed help with a dry cough, right? The air in the hospital's filtered, and so it was very dry. And I could literally turn off his cough immediately with Calicarb 30C, right? That worked beautifully for him. He had trouble, as most older men do, with having an enlarged prostate. And I was able to give him some remedies, and immediately that problem just disappeared. He didn't have it. And it prevented him from having to have more medications, which was a problem for him. He just didn't tolerate any of the meds well. And because of the drug reaction, his swallowing was off, which meant that he aspirated. And so he had pneumonia. He had blood clots in his lungs. He had so many sepsis. Boy, we had sepsis 3 times, I believe. And each time we were able to pull him back from the abyss because of CarboVeg 200C and other remedies that we were guided by our homeopath to give him. You know, I'm so grateful because even when he was passing, I don't know if your listeners will know about the death rattle, but the secretions build up in the throat, and sometimes they're thick and hard. They can't really swallow them. And so there's kind of this gurgling. And it's very difficult for family to have to listen to that and just see their loved ones suffering with what to us would be uncomfortable, right? And certainly there's discomfort for them too, but maybe they're not as aware, right, because of their state. But either way, I was able to assist with that, and he never had that again. One time, one dose, and it just completely went away. And so it made his passing much more peaceful, right, on everyone who was around, and it certainly helped my mom. And so there's a million ways that we were comforted by homeopathy and being able to do something to help him, to alleviate his discomfort, to alleviate symptoms. We assisted with his back pain. So it was amazing. And then, of course, afterwards with the grief. And I was able to help not only myself, but my mom, my siblings. I literally was giving my mom remedies at the funeral. She got a major headache, and belladonna to the rescue. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that because, sometimes our loved ones aren't open to homeopathy, but maybe they'll allow you to use it to help them as a supplemental treatment. Hi, Eugenie. This is Tammy from Texas. Again, I thought of a story I wanted to share about my cat. So my cat had an infection in one of his eyes, and this infection was not clearing up, not going away. This is something he had had before, but it seemed like before it was short-lived, and it would usually go away pretty much on its own. And he's an outdoor cat, and he's not a very friendly kitty. He's the pet you can't pet. But anyway, we were dutifully wrapping him in a towel and putting colloidal silver eye drops in his eyes. So if you can imagine, no one enjoyed this experience, not the cat, that's for sure. And, it's a little tricky to put eye drops into the eyes of a cat. Clearly they have claws, so the wrapping in the blanket was the key to not getting scratched. But I really needed to do this like 3 times a day, but with the busyness of children in a household, it didn't happen very regularly. And so the infection just kept coming back. Not to mention, you're not really getting to the root of the issue. So we were headed out to a water park one day, and I had all the kids in the car, and I'm locking the front door, and I look over and there's the cat. And I'm like, oh, great, we forgot. And I opened the door back to the house, and I ran inside and I grabbed Euphrasia 30C, and I dropped one pellet in this cat's water dish. Now, I'm telling you, this thing had been going on for 2 weeks, and the cat's eye was all swollen shut and matted, and it was awful looking and draining, all of it. And we ran out the door to go to the water park, and I just left it in its water dish. And I had listened to enough podcasts of people talking about how cats don't drink that often, right? So they only visit their water dish a couple times a day, and that the animals are kind of good about self-dosing. And he did have a second water source that he could drink from as well. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to let him self-dose today and hope for the best. So we spent all day long at the water park, and we got home that evening, and the cat's eye was completely clear. Like, no sign of infection whatsoever. I was shocked. I mean, I had been using homeopathy for a long time, and I don't know why it didn't dawn on me to try to use homeopathy for the cat sooner. Like, I should have known better. This is one of those moments where you just kind of hit yourself in the forehead. And I think you've even said that you've had moments like that where, like, why didn't I try homeopathy? But anyway, yeah, so funny. The cat felt better. We felt better. The stress was off. It was over. And that has now been several years ago, and the cat has never again had an infection with his eyes. So I think we cured him, hopefully permanently. So if not, I know what remedy to go to. So anyway, I just wanted to share that last story. We love homeopathy.